He was the last person known to see her alive, not a stranger, not a masked figure caught tampering with a doorbell camera. Her own son-in-law. His name is Tommaso Cioni, an Italian-born science teacher who spent 2 decades building a quiet life in Tucson, Arizona. Married to her daughter Annie, a regular at Sunday family dinners. And on the night 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home, he was the one who drove her there. Investigators say he waited in the driveway until she was safely through the door. Then he drove away. By the next morning, she was gone. And within days, cameras confirmed something else. A masked figure, carrying a backpack, had been on her property in the middle of the night, tampering with the very camera that should have caught his face. Online, true crime forums did what true crime forums do. They took the timeline, the last known contact, a family in the middle of financial and personal changes, and a masked figure no one could identify, and built a suspect out of the son-in-law standing closest to the case. Some accused Cioni of being porch guy himself. Investigators impounded his wife's car for weeks. The theories didn't stop, even after law enforcement said, on the record, that he wasn't a suspect at all. So this is where we start. Not because Tommaso Cioni did anything, the sheriff himself will tell you he didn't, but because his story is the story of what happens when the internet gets ahead of the evidence. And once we've cleared that up, we're going to walk through what investigators actually found. The DNA, the ransom notes, the guilty plea, and the reason this case is still unsolved 5 months later. Nancy Ellen Guthrie, born Nancy Long, was 84 years old. Born in Fort Wright, Kentucky in January 1942, she'd called the Tucson area home for more than 5 decades after moving there with her family in the early 1970s. To most of the country, she's known through her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. But in Tucson, Nancy was simply a devoted grandmother, a churchgoer who took part in a regular live-stream service, and, every Sunday, a fixture at family dinners with her daughter Annie and Annie's husband Tommaso. That Saturday started like any other. Nancy arrived at Annie and Tommaso's home at 5:32 in the evening for dinner. They talked, they ate, and just before 10 p.m., Tommaso drove her home. He watched her walk inside, then he left. It was the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie by anyone in her family. This is where the case becomes genuinely strange, because almost everything we know about the hours Nancy disappeared comes not from witnesses, but from machines. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera at Nancy's home went offline. Someone had physically tampered with it. Roughly 25 minutes later, motion sensors on the property picked up movement, even with the camera disabled. And then, at 2:28 a.m., something investigators have called one of the more chilling data points in the entire case. The monitoring app connected to Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. According to reporting on the investigation, that disconnection is consistent with Nancy being moved out of range of her own device. In other words, physically taken from the house around that time. Cameras can be disabled, phones can be left behind, but a pacemaker isn't something you can simply switch off or delete footage from. It logs. It reports back. And in this case, its silence at 2:28 a.m. may be one of the clearest technical markers of exactly when Nancy left her home, willingly or not. Nancy didn't show up for a live-streamed church service she took part in regularly. A friend from the congregation noticed and reached out to the family. Relatives went to check on her around 11 a.m. They searched the house and the surrounding property, found nothing, and called the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Deputies arrived at 12:15 p.m. and quickly determined Nancy was missing under what police would later describe as deeply concerning circumstances. Her phone was still inside. Her medications, critical, daily medications, were untouched. There was no sign of forced entry. This wasn't a case of an elderly woman wandering off. This was, in the department's own words, an interrupted life. Investigators recovered blood outside the front door of the home. Testing confirmed it belonged to Nancy. Combined with the untouched medication and phone, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos made his position clear early. He believed Nancy had been abducted. On February 10th, the FBI released still images and a short clip recovered from the doorbell camera before it went dark. It showed a masked individual, described by the Bureau as armed, wearing a backpack and gloves, tampering with the camera itself. In the days that followed, a person of interest was detained and questioned by investigators. He was ultimately released without charge, one of several leads in this case that has looked promising and then gone cold. Investigators later recovered a pair of black gloves near the property. According to reporting on the case, testing suggested they matched the gloves visible in the surveillance footage. But when that evidence was run against the National DNA database, there was no match for the unknown male whose DNA was recovered, meaning whoever left those gloves behind has never been in the system. The FBI has also been analyzing a hair sample and what's been described as mixed DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home. DNA that, as of the most recent reporting, still hasn't been conclusively tied to a known individual. Multiple agencies, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and search and rescue teams, expanded their search into the desert terrain surrounding the Catalina foothills. At one point, investigators were even seen examining the property's septic tank, probing it with a long stick and a flashlight in a scene captured on video by local press. None of it so far has led to Nancy. On February the 2nd, Tucson CBS affiliate KOLD-TV reported it had received a letter demanding payment for Nancy's release. Investigators reviewed it, took it seriously, and shared it with the FBI, though authorities wouldn't confirm at the time whether it actually came from whoever was holding her. The note reportedly contained specific, non-public details about the layout of the home and what Nancy had been wearing the night she vanished. Investigators asked media outlets to keep the contents private to avoid compromising the case. The next day, TMZ reported receiving its own alleged ransom note, this one demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin, according to law enforcement sources, along with a cryptocurrency wallet address. According to a separate note obtained by a Tucson CNN affiliate, the demand was $6 million, with a deadline of 5 o'clock in the evening on February 9th, and a direct threat against Nancy's life if it wasn't met. That deadline came and went. No proof Nancy was even alive was ever produced. Days earlier, Savannah Guthrie had already addressed the situation publicly, appearing alongside her siblings Annie and Cameron in a video statement. She said the family was ready to talk and, aware that voices and images can be faked, asked directly for proof that their mother was alive. A second, separate message was sent to CALD. The station chose not to release its contents, out of respect for the family and the investigation, though both local and federal authorities confirmed publicly they were reviewing a new message for authenticity. Here's the detail that stayed hidden for nearly 5 months. One of the notes, reportedly sent on February 6th, claimed that Nancy had died shortly after her disappearance, without any accompanying apology and without any further demand for money. Investigators asked that it be kept private specifically so as not to compromise the case or tip off whoever sent it. It wasn't made public until June 22nd. Then, at the end of June, the story shifted again. Reuters reported that an anonymous FBI official said investigators had determined all 3 of the notes, including the one claiming Nancy had died, were not genuine. But just 1 day later, the FBI's Phoenix field office pushed back on that framing. In a public statement, the Bureau said some of the ransom communications had been deemed to be extortion attempts without legitimacy, while others, in their words, may potentially be legitimate and are still being investigated as such. The case, they confirmed, is still being treated as an active kidnapping for ransom investigation, and at least one of those extortion attempts has already resulted in a conviction. A man named Derek Colella from Los Angeles pleaded guilty to 2 counts of harassment by telecommunications device, admitting he called and texted Nancy's family on February 4th asking about a Bitcoin transfer. He faces up to 2 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, though under a plea agreement he'll serve 5 years on probation instead. It's a grim reminder of how a national tragedy can attract more than one predator. Somewhere in this pile of notes and texts, there may be a genuine kidnapper, and there is, provably, at least one opportunist who saw a grieving family and tried to profit from their pain. Now, let's return to where we started. Tommaso Cioni teaches 6th grade science at Bassis Oro Valley School. He plays bass in a local band. He's been married to Nancy Guthrie for years, and by all accounts has lived a stable, unremarkable life in Tucson, right up until he became the center of a very public fixation, simply for being the last person to see his mother-in-law alive. The theory that gained the most traction online was that Cioni himself was Porch Guy, the masked figure caught tampering with Nancy's doorbell camera. Investigators impounded Nancy Guthrie's vehicle for weeks, reportedly to collect DNA evidence, which only fueled the speculation. Some reports named him a person of interest, though the sheriff's department never officially named him, or anyone in the family, as a suspect. On February 16th, Sheriff Chris Nanos held a press conference and formally cleared every member of the Guthrie family, including all spouses, including Cioni, of any involvement. According to his statement at the time, the family had been cooperative and gracious, and were victims in this case. He called suggestions otherwise not only wrong, but cruel. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer went further in an April live stream, directly addressing the comparisons. She pointed out there was no physical match between Cioni and the masked figure, not in build, not in gait, and said the real suspect appeared to be significantly younger than Cioni, who was in his early 50s. She also dismissed the motive theory entirely, noting Cioni and his wife had no financial problems and nothing to gain. News Nation correspondent Brian Entin, who has covered this case since day one, said he's found no evidence tying any family member to the disappearance, adding that he felt for Annie and Tommaso, watching themselves dragged through online speculation months after being formally cleared. By April, the pressure had grown bad enough that the couple posted no trespassing signs outside their home as sheriff's patrols in their neighborhood increased. Cioni has still never given a public interview addressing the accusations directly. He has, by every account, simply gone back to teaching 6th grade science while strangers online decided who he must be. So why open this story with him? Because it's the lesson this case keeps teaching. Proximity isn't proof. Being the last person to see someone isn't the same as being responsible for what happened to them. And in a case with actual forensic evidence, blood, gloves, DNA, a masked intruder on camera, the loudest theory online turned out to be the wrong one. As the weeks dragged on, the family raised the stakes themselves, offering a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery. Combined with the FBI's own reward and a separate anonymous donation to Tucson's tip line, the total climbed to $1.2 million. In a video that same day, Savannah made a painful acknowledgement that her mother may be dead, while the family continued to hold on to hope. She stepped away from hosting duties for weeks, including coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, before returning to Today on April 6th. In late June, more than 5 months in, Savannah made a renewed on-air plea to viewers, saying simply that the family loved their mother and would never stop looking for her. As of the most recent reporting, the case remains open. No suspect has been named. Tens of thousands of tips have poured in. One retired FBI agent believes the name of whoever is responsible is very likely already sitting somewhere in that pile, waiting to be connected to the right piece of evidence. The case has even reached far outside true crime circles. Reality star Khloe Kardashian discussed it on her own podcast, calling it heartbreaking that, in this day and age, there's still no concrete answer. It's a strange marker of just how far this story has traveled, from a quiet Tucson cul-de-sac to national television, true crime forums, and celebrity podcasts alike. It would have been easy to build this story around Tommaso Cioni. The internet already tried. He was the last one through the door, and for a lot of people online, that was enough. But the sheriff cleared him. The FBI never named him. Retired agents who've studied this case in detail say there's nothing there. What is there is stranger and sadder than any internet theory. A pacemaker that logged its own owner being carried out of range. Blood at the scene. A masked figure whose DNA matches no one in any database. Ransom notes that may be real, maybe extortion, and at least one confirmed liar already sitting in a plea deal. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened in that house after 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026. Until they come forward, an 84-year-old grandmother remains missing, and a family that has already endured 5 months of false leads, fake ransom notes, and a wrongly accused son-in-law keeps waiting for the one phone call that would actually mean something.